Hello, boys and girls. Today I'm going to discuss 2D arrays, the simple one, rows and columns and storing values in 2D arrays, as well as displaying a 2D array. So I hope you're all doing well and ready to get back into 2D arrays. This being a revision aspect. If you look at this example here on the rainfall application, we have rows and columns. So there are your columns coming down. So your columns are from January to December, and your rows are from Durban to Bloemfontein. So this is recording rainfall figures for each month for 3 cities. Now, one of the questions required here is to fill the 2D array with values, integer values. Now, here to fill the arrays, the 2D arrays with values, you could input. It was an open question, or you could assign random values. So let's assign random values. Now, the important point here is how do we access each position in the 2D array to put in a value? And to do that, your 2D arrays, whenever you have to access each position in 2D array, you need 2 for loops. A for loop to run for each row, for example, row 1 or Durban. And in Durban, you need to go through each month, so each column. So for each row and each column. So looking at the solution, firstly, your arrays need to be declared. Your rows and column, so let me just go back here. Okay, we have here, these are your months. So we're going to assume from here, the blue, that's a 1D array of string. Remember, your 2D array can only contain one type of values. In this case, your 2D array is all this light brown here, and they all refer to integer values. So that's your 2D array. Now, the blue here has been used to indicate a 1D array, and a 1D array is of type months. So it's an array of string. It's going to store the months for the year. And the yellow one is the 1D array to store a string for the cities. So your actual 2D array is just the brown ones, and the data type for that is integer. Your data type for a 2D array needs to be the same, whether it's integer, string, char, real. But the idea is it needs to be this, all values will be the same. So we're looking at an array of integer. So in the declaration, your array cities are 1 to 3 of string. We've got open brackets and we listed the cities. That's for your row. And the months are your columns, the 13, because the last one is for total. So the 12 months of the year, and then we have a last column for your total. There's your last column. It's not indicated here, but in the question somewhere required a column for total. Now, in most cases in the exam papers, the declaration will be given to you. You need to apply. Your 2D array is an array of rows, 3 rows. Remember the towns were in rows, or the areas or cities were in rows, and the 13 columns, the 12 months of the year and 1 for total. Now to input into your, to fill your 2D array, always remember, run a loop for row and then run a loop for column. So ask yourself, do you have to go into each position in a 2D array? If the answer is yes, then you need to run a row and column loop. So your row first and then your column. And to the array, we assign, in this case, we're assigning a random value 151, which is values 0 to 150. So the input can vary, but the idea is if you have to store values in a 2D array, you have to use a row and a column to run through the entire 2D array. Now to display this 2D array in this format means we need to display the months as well as the cities. We can use tab spacing between each, so it's spaced out. Now to display the months have to be displayed before we end up displaying the 2D array. So if you look at this, S line is equal to #9. So we're going to store a tab space in S line. And the reason why we need a tab space is if we're displaying the months, we need a space in the front. We have to leave a tab space and then go for the months. Now there are 13, including did not reflect all here, but there are 13 including the total. So the 12 months and total. So your loop, I used K, you can use any variable here, run from 1 to 13. These are columns, so you could have used C here. And S line is S line plus the months plus #9. So we're taking, after we have a tab space, once you display a tab space, then we're going to add to the tab space to S line the next month, which is January. And then we want a #9, so we can use a tab space to get to the next month, which is February. So in this, for this 13 columns, each month is added with a tab space, so allows you to get to the next month. So allows a space between the months. So with a tab space, you have even columns. If you don't use a tab space, then we're using plus a space with the open and close quotes. But tab space would be a better idea. And finally, display red line. When you're displaying, display S line onto your rich edit display. When you're displaying S line, remember it's this S line that was formed with a tab space and each month and a tab space between each month. So that's what's being displayed. So we created a string for the column headings from the array months. Now array cities is an array 1 to 3 of string. That's Durban, Cape Town, and Bloemfontein. Now we cannot display this entire row on its own. We have to display it with the row, with each row of the 2D arrays. So you get this output. So we need to display Durban and then the first row of the 2D array, Cape Town and the second row. So it needs to display each position of the 1D array with the 2D. Now, generally when you're doing this, if it's confusing, display your 2D array. Your 2D array means you're visiting each position in the 2D array. So as I said, use a row. There's your row, and you use a column. Now, once you have a loop running from row to column, then you have to figure out what we have to do next. So a loop running from row, 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and each of the 3 rows, the column. So for row 1, we're going to go S line is equal to S line plus the city. So for row 1, we take the city name from your array cities. Plus #9, so we leave a tab space. And then we're going to go to the first column. The first column, you add to S line the first column value, which is 110 plus a #9. There's always a #9, so we leave a space to get to the next one. So again, to display a 2D array, which is a popular question, so you need to know how to display properly. You run a row and you run a column. And if there is an array in which you have to store values from the beginning of the 2D array, you start with S line and you join your 1D array, which is your city. And in here, you join your columns. So for the first row, for the 13 columns, you'd have ran through the entire 2D array, you join them, you display that line. Then we start with an empty line. This is just one solution. Okay, you can't put your empty line on the inside here. So this is just one solution. So once you display your line, you clear the line and you go back up to your next row. You go to the next row, you get Cape Town, you get all the values, you display it, you clear the line, you go back to the next one. That's Bloemfontein. You get the city Bloemfontein and all the values. So when you're displaying a 2D array, always go row and column with your begin and end. There's your begin and end. That's your begin and end for your column. There's your begin and end for your row. And then in this, you decide what needs to be displayed in the front. If there is nothing in the front, then you're going to just work with your columns. Then you will just go with the columns. And if there is no city, you go with the columns and you display the line, you clear it, and you go back to the next column. If there are no column, if there's no row headings. Right, that is display. We'll move on to the next aspect. That will be the end of this lesson. Thank you, boys and girls.